I remember the exact moment my world fell apart. It was a Tuesday. The rain was lashing against the window of our tiny apartment, the one I could barely afford. She stood there, her arms crossed, her face a mask of disappointment. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice cold enough to freeze the already chilly room. "I love you, but love doesn't pay the bills." I begged her. I told her things would get better, that I was working hard, that my dreams were just around the corner. I had given her everything. The last of my savings went to that birthday necklace she wore, the meals I skipped just so she could eat at her favorite restaurant. But it wasn't enough. She saw a dead end, a man with empty pockets and a head full of what she called useless dreams. She walked out that door, leaving me with nothing but the echo of her words and a shattered heart. The days that followed were a blur of cheap coffee and sleepless nights. The silence in that apartment was deafening. Every corner held a memory of her, a ghost of a future we were supposed to have. I was at my lowest, completely broken. I questioned everything, my worth, my path, my very existence. The world felt gray and pointless. But one night, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my old laptop, something inside me snapped. It was a quiet rebellion. Was I going to let her definition of me become my reality? Was I going to let a broken heart be the final chapter of my story? No. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would not be defined by my empty bank account or by the woman who couldn't see past it. I would succeed, not for her, not for revenge, but for the man in the reflection who deserved a better life. I poured every ounce of my pain, my anger, and my frustration into my work. I was a software developer, and I had this idea, this one crazy idea for an app that everyone told me was impossible. It became my obsession. I coded for 18 hours a day, fueled by instant noodles and a burning desire to prove everyone, especially myself, wrong. I stopped seeing friends. I stopped going out. My world shrank to the glowing characters on my screen. There were countless moments of doubt, times when I was so close to giving up, when the loneliness felt like a physical weight crushing me. But then I'd remember her walking out that door, and the fire would ignite all over again. It wasn't about getting her back anymore. It was about building a new me from the ashes of the old one. Months turned into a year, then two. I was living and breathing my project. I pitched it to investors and was rejected more times than I can count. Too risky, they'd say. The market isn't ready. Each rejection was a fresh wound, but it also made me tougher. I refined my pitch, tweaked the code, and worked even harder. Then, one day, I got a call. It was from a small venture capital firm that had seen my presentation. They were intrigued. They saw the potential I knew was there all along. We met, and after a grueling 3-hour meeting, they offered me a seed investment. It wasn't a lottery win, but it was a lifeline. It was the first real validation that my useless dream might actually be worth something. That first check felt heavier than a brick of gold. It was the beginning of everything. With the funding, I hired a small team of developers who were as passionate as I was. We moved out of my cramped apartment and into a small, shared office space. The energy was electric. We were the underdogs, a group of believers fighting for a shared vision. The app, which we called ConnectSphere, started to take shape. It was a platform designed to connect people based on shared life goals and ambitions, not just superficial interest. It was born from my own loneliness, my own desire for a deeper connection. We launched a beta version, and the initial feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Users loved the concept. Our user base started growing, first by the hundreds, then by the thousands. We were onto something big, and we all felt it. The next few years were a whirlwind. ConnectSphere exploded. We went from a small startup to a major player in the tech industry. We secured more rounds of funding, our team grew, and our office got bigger. My face started appearing on the covers of business magazines. I was the overnight success story, the guy who came from nothing. They didn't see the years of isolation, the rejections, the heartbreak that fueled the entire journey. My life had changed in ways I could never have imagined. I bought a house with a view of the city, drove a car I used to only dream about, and traveled the world for business. I had everything I thought I ever wanted. But sometimes, in the dead of night, in my big, empty house, I'd still feel a pang of the old loneliness. One evening, I was at a charity gala, one of those fancy events I still felt awkward attending. I was shaking hands, making small talk, when I saw her. Across the crowded ballroom, she stood there, looking just as beautiful as I remembered. Our eyes met. For a moment, the world stopped. The noise of the party faded away, and it was just the two of us, separated by a sea of strangers and 5 years of history. She looked stunned, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. I could see a million questions in her eyes. I gave a small, polite nod and turned back to the conversation I was having, but my mind was racing. It was the ultimate dramatic twist, a scene straight out of a movie. The broken boy she left was now the man everyone in this room wanted to talk to. She made her way through the crowd, a determined look on her face. "I can't believe it's you," she said, her voice a little shaky. "I've read about you. About Connexphere. I had no idea." I just smiled. "Life is full of surprises," I replied, my tone calm and even. The desperate, heartbroken boy she knew was gone. In his place stood a man who was confident, self-assured, and in control of his own destiny. She started talking about the old days, trying to reminisce, her words laced with a subtle hint of regret. She mentioned how she often thought of me, how she made a mistake. It was the moment I had once fantasized about, the moment she would come back, begging for a second chance. But as I stood there, listening to her, I didn't feel anger or triumph. I felt nothing. The old wounds had healed into scars, and those scars had made me stronger. I realized that my success wasn't the final act of revenge. It was my liberation. I had built a life for myself, a life she couldn't see, a future she didn't believe in. "I'm happy for you," she said finally, her voice soft. "It looks like you got everything you ever wanted." I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her not as the love of my life or the woman who broke my heart, but just as a person from my past, a chapter in a book that was now closed. "I did," I said, "but not in the way you think. I learned that the most valuable things in life aren't about money. They're about believing in yourself when no one else does." I wished her well, turned, and walked away, leaving her standing there in the middle of the glittering ballroom. I didn't look back. My future was ahead of me, and for the first time, it was completely and totally my own. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.